Hello, good evening, Deborah. Welcome. It's so wonderful to see you, and I'm so glad that we're hitting off this evening with this chat across continents. So, welcome all of you, and welcome to this conversation with Deborah Roderick. Deborah is a dear friend from our Lifebook Accountability group. She's an artist. She grew up in Pennsylvania, Gettysburg, where she trained in fine art. She then taught for a number of years. She's also worked in theater, and she ran a play called Esmeralda and Friends. She's also acted in a number of television shows and small films while she's been in Berlin. So, Deborah, how come Berlin? How did you move from the States to Berlin?
Well, it was a spontaneous decision. My eldest son called me and told me that he and his partner were expecting my first grandchild, and I was in a very big transition in my life. I was divorcing after 30 years of marriage, and I just spontaneously on the phone said, do you need some childcare help? Ian was in the middle of school, and I know that Inga was traveling a lot with her business at the time, and so I thought they might need some support. So I put my teaching job on hold, took a sabbatical for a year, packed up my house, put everything in storage, and flew to Berlin, intending it to be just a year. And then my granddaughter came and I fell in love, and we're 7.5 years later into Berlin. I've been working on keeping my artist visa and doing my work in Berlin so that I can stay in Germany. So that's how I've been straddling the two continents for the last 7.5 years.
Wow, I've seen some of your sketches. You've done some wonderful sketches from the Sistine Chapel, and you've got some beautiful acrylic work because the theme that you've used is energy and movement and spirituality as part of your art. So how did that come about?
Well, I think, spirit, when we talk about spirit, it is an untouchable entity that we feel either within ourselves, or some people are lucky enough to see energy and movement and see auras and kind of connect with that unseen world that a lot of us often refer to it, as spirituality, or our inner lights. And I, as an artist, wanted to share kind of my thinking about it, and my feeling, more my feeling about it, and try to share that energy, that movement, that light, the feeling of so that people, when they look at my artwork, they can kind of walk into the painting a little bit,
Mhm,
particularly my abstracts,
yes.
and derive from it what is meaningful to them. And I tried to, I have some paintings on the website, I think, that are in that wooden frame, that
Mhm.
are that are made out of paper, and they're attached, and they're supposed to kind of give you the feeling of air and like the wind. We
Yeah.
feel the wind, we experience the wind in various different ways, subtly or strongly. And as we walk by those paintings, or as I walk by those paintings, they are moved by that invisible wind, and they're supposed to represent kind of our invisible spirituality that is still shared with one another, even if it's not seen.
Yeah.
I don't know if that explains
Yes,
the
I mean,
art of it.
certainly. I mean, when we have our conversations in our group, one thing that really comes across for me is how grounded you are, how loving, how compassionate, and the loving kindness that comes through you is so apparent. So, how do you integrate your spiritual practice? I know in Life Book we have all these 12 categories and we talk about spirituality, but what practice do you have that integrates your art, your creativity, your spirituality, the groundedness that, I'm sure because you've gone through so many stages in your life of different kinds of careers and different roles. I know you say on your website you've been a wife, you're a mom, you're a grandmother, an artist, a teacher. So integrating all these roles, what sort of practice keeps you grounded? What's got to say?
Well, my whole life, I've been interested in spirituality or my connection with the divine. It
Mm,
started, when I was young in a very traditional Christian upbringing.
right.
And somehow when I went off to college, is when I was first introduced to Edgar Casey and spirituality in a non-conventional form.
Mm-hmm.
And I took courses in college,
Mm-hmm.
which back then were, an anomaly. Not many were offered, and my interest grew, and I got this voracious appetite
Mm-hmm.
uh, to read about different religions.
Yes.
I explored Buddhism and many other peripherally other religions and stuff, and slowly fell into and got exposed to religious science, which has really for the last 15 years, I would say, of my
Mm-hmm.
life, or 20 years of my life, has been my grounding force and got me through some very difficult times in my life. The breakup of a 30-year marriage was a death in my life, a significant death in my life. And because religious science teaches basically denying that negative condition
Yes.
and looking and trying to refocus it in an affirming and positive way,
Yes.
and also just grabbing at the next highest level of, sorry, that's my mother, I'm here in her house. And she just woke up, she's 85. But anyway, religious science is, you work with affirming
Yes.
and realizing and coming to know, which I truly believe, that loving kindness,
Yes.
passion is the center of the world and the universe.
Yes.
And it is a common denominator that is across all religions,
Yes.
no matter where you grew up and whatever you were exposed to as a child. If no matter where you live, that, I think, love is the basis of all of the teachings of these different religions. And so my practice is, John and Missy, the life book that
Yes.
you and I shared, actually helped me come up with these 12 sacred practices.
Yes.
So it actually allows me to check off through the day what I get done and I've tried to make my whole life a spiritual practice. Now, I'm not always successful about that, but I
That's
wake
why it's
up,
called
I
a
do.
practice. That's why it's called a practice.
Pardon?
That's why it's called a practice.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so the same routine every morning before I start my day is to meditate, to do some kind of uplifting, affirming reading,
Mm-hmm.
whatever I may be reading at that time,
Yes.
and educate myself that way. Pray, I do that onomonopono.
Ho'oponopono.
ho-
Ho'oponopono.
what is it again?
Ho'oponopono.
Yeah, honomono. Anyway, I do that every day for myself
Yes.
and for my family members and for the world at large. I just take a moment, and then I have an energy practice that I've come up with that I believe grounds me and centers me and helps me with my consciousness. But no matter where you are on this life path, it's it you start where you are,
Yeah.
and you try to keep with it every single day. It's
Yeah.
like exercising. We can see when we're exercising regularly by the way that our muscles and our body responds,
Yeah.
and we can't see it so much inside in the internal. But I believe, and through friends like you who give me feedback about how that I'm being successful
Yes.
slowly, that I'm exuding this loving kindness
Yes.
and compassion through my life experience.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a
I
little bit
because
of what.
we just saw your mom, so you're not in Berlin now. You're in the States
No,
with your mom.
yeah, I've come back. I came back the beginning, or the end of 2020, and to be with my mom. She had some, major health issues at the end of the year, and is starting into the early dementia.
Right.
And so I've straddled the two continents for the last 7.5 years, because I have another biological son and two foster sons that I am very connected with here in the States. And I have many good friends. And then my mother.
Hmm.
And so I've been with mom for 2.5 months to
Okay.
help her recuperate from her heart attack and get her
Hmm.
eating well and exercising, and to just enjoy her company.
Yeah.
But it's challenging,
Yeah.
it's challenging to be a full-time caretaker.
Yeah.
And before this, I would come home before the pandemic or the COVID. I was coming home maybe 3 to 4 times a year and staying with her for about a month to give, she's moved in basically, in the evenings anyway with my sister, and then Shelly brings her back out here during the day so that she can have some time alone. But we don't feel comfortable any longer with her living full time 24/7 at her house.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
to give
that's
her,
quite difficult.
pardon, I'm sorry.
For that age, elderly people living on their own is a little bit difficult.
Yes, exactly. And so I'm here to, support my mom,
Mhm.
and to allow her the freedom and independence to be in her house with, a caretaker. And she really doesn't want to move into an assisted living. And so my sister and I are trying to make that her wishes, work for her.
Yeah.
And hopefully now, with the once the COVID, once we get all back, once the world gets back to normal, I'll be coming back more frequently, staying a little less than 6 months here, and 6 or 7 months in Germany, until my granddaughter doesn't need me anymore.
I don't think that's going to happen, and we'll come to that in a bit. We're going to talk about the grandmother hypothesis, but before that, I want to ask you, because it's mastering the menopause and beyond, and we want to talk a little bit about um, the menopause journey, and because I know even I'm going through a similar situation that you are, that as we go through the menopause, we do end up looking after elderly parents, and um, it's like a cusp of lots and lots of challenges. So while your mom still remembers, have you ever had a chance to talk to her about her menopause journey, or do you remember when you were younger, any aunts or older sisters or cousins going through the menopause? What was it like in their generation to go through menopause compared to your menopause journey, for example?
Well, actually, I was just speaking with my mom about hers, because she was a young mother,
Hmm.
and I actually left the house. She had my sister and I when she was like 22 and 23.
Right.
So by her early 40s, both my sister and I were in university, and then basically out in the world. So we weren't around when she was actually in full blown menopause. So my memory with her is not vivid,
Hmm.
but she did tell me that, she had problems sleeping, that
Mhm.
she, had hot flashes. But she said that she didn't really talk about it, but she remembers her mother
Mm.
and going through it, and my grandmother, who I call Nana, used to, and in thinking about it afterwards, I realize now what I was seeing when I was, a young teenager. Is she would get really red, and she would, water would drip down her face, perspiration and everything. And I always wondered, why that would happen. But I was young and I didn't really think about menopause. And so that was an interesting kind of feedback and exchange that my mother had given to me. And I remember too an aunt of mine who didn't used to go. We used to go to family. My dad was from a large family, and we had family gatherings several times a year. And for a number of years, she stopped coming.
Oh, okay.
And one of my
Stop
aunts just,
socializing.
pardon?
He stopped socializing.
She stopped socializing. And one of my aunts said, "Oh, Gladys is going through the change."
Right.
Well, they didn't even refer to menopause as menopause.
Yes.
They just said it was the change. And somebody, I got as a young person that there was something happening in with women at a certain age, and that they didn't want to socialize. They didn't want to be this friendly, outgoing,
Mm-hmm.
person. And they didn't mind stepping back and saying, "I'm not doing this anymore." So, that's kind of all that I remember from my family. But I also remember in the early stages, in my late 40s, before I was really going through menopause. I think there was a book written by Christine Northrup, um, a medical doctor, just that was the first. It was big news because it was the first book that was really out there officially talking about what we women start to go through
Mm-hmm.
when we are no longer having children.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was the first one of the first books that to people. Now, you're a medical doctor, so you've always been, and a gynecologist, so you've
Yes.
always been aware of these phases in our lives. But for we general women, we don't, unless we had our friends to talk about it. There was no source.
Yes.
And as I said, my mom didn't talk to me about it. My grandmother didn't talk to me about it. It was just my picking up among family gatherings that
Yes.
I kind of even knew that there was something to look forward to called the change.
So, I mean, we've met as Lifebook accountability buddies, and in Lifebook we have these 12 categories, and there's a lot of emphasis on health and well-being and character traits. So, um, can you just tell us a little bit about your Lifebook journey and how has it impacted your understanding of health and well-being and vitality and keeping your brain sharp? Because I talk a lot about all these things in my course on menopause. So how has Lifebook helped you integrate all of these really important factors about health? Because health is not just physical health, it's your intellectual health, it's your social health, your social connections. And especially in COVID times, that suffered a lot for many people because
Yes.
they weren't able to meet. So how did Lifebook help you integrate all of these different categories into this kind of menopause journey, even though it's not an acute phase for you, but even then, how did it influence your well-being?
Wow. Well, first of all, it made me aware that there of these 12 categories.
Mm,
And so just becoming conscious of and being thinking about, we took a
mm,
week at a time,
yes,
to think about, deeply think about, well, what do I eat? What do I put into my body?
yes.
Let's just start there. And I had just been coming off of a course in Mine Valley
Yeah.
that was called Wild Fit,
Wow.
which
Yes.
we found out that we
Yeah.
did, which also made us, and you probably felt the same thing, so much more conscious about what you stuff in your mouth during the
Absolutely.
day,
Absolutely.
and the effects that preservatives
Yeah.
and nourishing your body. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, when I started on those green smoothies,
Yes.
I started to notice, that my cravings for the bad food, which I
Yeah.
still like a lot,
Yes.
the chips and the processed stuff. I mean, I'm a big savory snack person as opposed to maybe a sweet, but I still like sweets. But anyway, as I went and started to educate myself through Wild Fit and started to actually commit to that process, I
Mm.
think a little over 3 months, and we slowly gave up, these, alcohol and preservatives and dairy and, all of those other kinds of things. I started to feel mentally sharper,
Yeah.
and my body actually started, I don't know about you, but I miss when I don't follow at least the green smoothie,
Yes.
a day. It feels like it stimulates my brain cells, cleans my inner being out, and so just becoming conscious of feeding myself
Yes.
well.
Yes.
And with that, I had been, I've been, as I said earlier, I've been on the spiritual
Mm-hmm.
path for a long time. So it also, the discipline of doing that eating helped me exercise better,
Mm-hmm.
become more disciplined in my daily practice and trying not to miss it, getting these
Yeah.
um, 12 sacred choices established.
Yeah.
It gave me checkpoints so that I could visually
Mm-hmm.
see. So I also I read somewhere that as we age, because I did go through menopause, and as I was starting in the early phases of that, I was brain fogged, I wasn't
Yes.
sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
and I was very affected, and it made the choice to supplement with hormones.
Yes.
And while I was on that, I wasn't faced. I felt really pretty good,
Yes.
pretty
Yes.
normal. And it wasn't until I went off of that about a year and a half ago or two that I started, the brain fuzziness started to come back, the sleeping problems started to come back. But I decided and to approach it more holistically.
Mm-hmm.
Not that hormones aren't holistic, but you can speak to that. But anyway, doing brain games,
Yes.
like memory games, and learning new skills, like
You're learning a
learning.
new language, aren't you? You're learning a new language.
I'm learning German, which
Yes.
I've been reading. We used to think that by the time we were our age, that
Yeah.
there was no help for our brain. And and now we're finding out, or at least the people that I've been following, say that we can exercise our brains
Yes.
by developing new, like I'm learning also to juggle,
Okay.
which also create new synapses,
Yeah.
neural synapses or something like that
Yes.
in our brains that help, the languages, and it's like it dusts off the cobwebs and creates new pathways in our brain. So I've been trying to, as I nurture, because I've seen a big difference in without estrogen, that my skin is aging, my vitality is waning a little bit. It affects you sexually in your intimacy. You have to, all of my friends are talking about needing estrogen supplements in new areas of their body that we didn't think about
Yeah.
before.
Absolutely.
And so I, as an optimistic person, as a person who is learning each day to love myself and nurture myself better, I'm trying through food, through, intellectual stimulation, through,
Exercise.
uh, exercise to nurture myself and love myself compassionately, and find new avenues to let out my through my artwork, to be creative in new ways, in relationship with people. You know what I mean?
Yes, and with Life Book, one of the things that, and we have talked about this before as well, because by this time most of us have gone through lots of difficulties. um, I'm not saying just because we're menopausal, but generally, you get to menopause, and there's this stereotype of grumpy old women. Once they even have
Right,
television serials about women griping, and we're not like that. I mean, nobody in our group is a grumpy old woman.
right.
I'm sure even the others have gone through difficult times in your life, but you've had it particularly challenging, because now you're back with your mom, you're looking after your mom, and you're, going through stuff from 30 years. And, yes, it's a healing journey, but there can be, we can end up becoming bitter and, unhappy and melancholy and not wanting to socialize. I can totally get your friend, or your aunt who used to kind of go into a recluse. It's certainly something that women go through, and it's very noticeable that you can't tolerate noise, you stop tolerating stupid people, you don't want to be part of the gossip circle anymore, you just can't stand, you're much more able to say no. But how do you manage to keep yourself um, stable and not end up with bitterness and stuff, even though you're going through this healing journey, even though you're actually back in the face of addressing the difficult times of your life, one of the most difficult times of your life?
Well, it is challenging because it is, you have to face that you're entering the end stages of this physical life. And whatever it is that you want to accomplish, you better get it done before you get to my mom's stage.
Yes.
And so, I don't want to keep harping on this daily practice, but honestly, the the daily practice of trying to center myself, and when I get angry at my mom, or when I get angry at myself, or when I get down with myself, I try to lift myself up, put my good big girl panties on, learn from what I've been through in life, and say tomorrow is another day.
Yes.
You know, try to call somebody who I know. I have a prayer partner, through my religious science connections.
Mhm.
And when I get really, really down, or, which we all have, and when I feel like crawling under the covers in the bed and having a big weeping session and thinking,
For me.
like passing me by, I share with our accountability group.
Yes.
I have this woman that I do treatment, which is just another word for prayer with, which is affirmative prayer. So I'm all about trying to deny the condition that is in front of me, and refocusing and going down the path of negativity
Yes.
to positivity.
Positive.
And how can I turn this situation around
Yes.
and make it not as bad as it is? Now, I have years of practice at that,
Yes.
and I won't say that
How does
issues
your
in
art help? How does your art help? Because you've used your art with the energy, the moving, and the spirituality. You've brought it into your art. How do you keep creative? How do you keep? Because for me, I notice that one of the first things that goes out when I'm feeling down or upset is that I just don't want to be creative. I don't want to have to put mental energy into going down a path where I'm thinking differently. So how do you
Yeah.
keep your creative juices flowing?
Well, one of the things I've come to find about my art,
Mm.
and also about when I did puppetry
Mhm.
and when I was an actor, is that creativity doesn't really, for me anymore, take thought.
Right.
It's really just about picking up the pen or
Mm.
the paintbrush and opening the box and begin allowing myself. eh, I think we all have this voice behind, this critical voice that says you're not doing that right,
Yeah.
you know, or whatever, or or we get this black cloud that is over us. Well, I've learned that if I can just get myself to pick up the brush,
Yes.
that that it starts to flow. And
Yes.
if I and the longer that I work, the
Yes.
deeper in, and the voice, that negative voice, or that part of me that didn't want to do anything, it's just about that Nike saying of just
Just
do
do
it.
it.
It never really resonated with me so much, except during the times, because COVID has been challenging for all of us.
Yes. Mm.
We miss the social interaction. We miss, when you live alone, you miss the social, the touch, that the warmth, that just being in friendship, and also out of relationship, you miss that physical warmth that you get from hugging another person.
Yes.
And so getting conscious, life book, John and Missy would say, just do it,
Mm.
just do it.
Yeah.
And I had a friend, I do want to, while we're talking about menopause and some of the feelings that women have, she told me a story one time, which it's resonated with me, obviously, because I've still remembered it. But she said to me that she, one time when she was in a store,
Yeah.
that she felt that she could shoplift anything
What?
because she wasn't noticed. She
Oh,
wasn't looked at. Nobody saw her anymore.
yeah.
They saw her when she was young and attractive, and
Yeah.
people looked and were nice, and and then when she was a mother, they wanted to help her if, she was having
Yeah.
struggling
Yeah.
problems with her children or something. But she noticed when she went in and tried to get the eye of a sales clerk, or just even, in her day-to-day life, that people, you know people ignored her,
Yeah.
and she wasn't seen. And she said to me one time, when she told me that story, when we were out together and we were being ignored by something, and she said, looked at me and said, Deb, don't you know we're unseen? Once you get, to our age, people aren't aware of us anymore.
Yeah.
And I think, being the eternal optimist, I think, I like to think that that's changing
Yeah.
as our generations are aging, and as we're being more active, older and older, and being more physically fit, and fighting that aging thing that happens. I think that we're bringing to the table wisdom as older women. you know we're certainly talking about
Yes.
our sexuality and menopause, and how that is affecting our lives much more than just my mom's
Yeah.
generation, because she told me nobody talked about it.
Nobody talked about.
They just, it was, a faux pas. You just didn't talk about how you were feeling and how that affected your relationship. And we're bolder women, we're self-reliant, and smarter.
Yeah.
We're out, more of us are out into the career, and so we're, saving, we're having IRAs,
Yeah.
we're thinking about our future. But we also are in this stage of life where we're still trying to keep our career going
Yes.
while balancing taking care of our elderly parents and elderly family members, and offering up our services as child care providers and for our kids and our grandchildren.
There's three things you've touched on there, and I'll just briefly talk about them before we talk about your role as a grandmom with your granddaughter. So in my course, I talk about the grandmother hypothesis, for menopause, because it kind of, what does menopause serve the human race? Because in most animal species, once the female stops being of any kind of reproductive value, they die out. They're not of much added value to that particular species. But in humans and some primates, the menopausal woman, and in particularly in human species, the age between 50 and 65 is a very valuable one. And in the grandmother hypothesis, we know that grandmothers are actually instrumental in us becoming the most populous species on Earth, because grandmothers were there to look after the kids and nurture them while the parents went to work and gather food or hunt or whatever. The other thing that comes up is that in this terms of this evolution, women over the age of 65 tend to lose their value to the species, because that's when they start to become dependent on other humans in that particular tribe, and then they become a liability, because obviously, if you're a nomadic tribe and you're moving, then trying to keep your elders safe from the elements while you're being nomads is very difficult. If you're settled somewhere and you end up having to look after very elderly parents, then they become a liability, because you can't go out and work, because you become a full-term carer. So in a lot of these studies, after the age of 65, you kind of become devalued in human society. And that's one aspect I want to talk to you about how Lifebook has changed this perception, and where do we want to be, once we cross the age of 65 and get into our 70s and 80s. And then the last point I particularly want you to discuss is this thing about sexuality. And when you talked about your friend, I particularly remember being molested, catcalled, being touched up the wrong way, right? Even in medical school, and thinking, one of my aspirations has been just to be invisible. So in one sense, I have moved into this social platform as I've gone through the menopause and become more visible, which is something totally against my nature, because my nature is to hide and become invisible. And I think age is given that kind of luxury where you can choose to become invisible. So unlike your friend, I actually prefer this kind of invisibility, where nobody wants to touch me up, though nobody particularly wants to catcall me, nobody's visually undressing me, and these are the unpleasant sides of being young that I never enjoyed. So I'd like you to briefly touch on all of these three areas. So um, I'd like you to talk about your relationship with your grandmother, and how your being this fit, vibrant, creative, and amazing, loving, kind grandmother is influencing her life, affecting her life, and how she perceives growing up and growing older, compared to when you saw your mom or your aunt, and what this change was. I mean, it's a generational change, but it's also a change in the model that you're presenting her.
Yes, yes. Well, that's a lot. I'll start with Ida's and my relationship. I feel very blessed and very fortunate that I can do my work, in Germany, and that I have this relationship with this little girl, because I only had boys in my life prior to her.
Right.
So I had, as I mentioned earlier, I had two biological sons and two foster sons, and guys are different than
Yes.
girls.
That's
and
very
and
different.
and I actually wished only for boys when I was pregnant with my children, because I was afraid of how I would influence little girls.
Right.
I was afraid that I wouldn't be perfect, or would mess them up in some way. And so having gone through the parenting of sons and being mostly successful, though if you speak to them individually, they'll probably have their own, therapy hang-ups with things that I did to them. But now having the opportunity with Ida, who is also a female, and seeing how little girls go through, she's giving me this experience too of being able to watch a little girl in her growing up and who she's modeling after. I see they, Ian and Inga have made a very conscious decision to expose Ida to little, what we've always characterized as little boy things. I mean, her favorite toys are to play cars, which I think is amazing because we gave her dolls, we gave her cars, but that was her father's favorite toy too. So we spend hours together role playing, but she's also interested in with little cars, but she's also interested in having tea parties with me.
Wow.
So, and we invite all of her stuffed animals, and we are creative together.
Yes.
And we form voices together, and for each of her little animals, and then she mothers them in ways through the tea parties. But I guess what I'm getting at is I don't have the hang up of worrying about whether I'm affecting her day-to-day well-being and whether she's growing up. I have a freedom as her grandmother to get down on the floor. And so I guess that is role modeling. My grandmother never got down on the floor and
She
rolled
wasn't fit
around
enough.
with me
You're fit enough to do that.
and went out on trampolines and jumped up and down and rode bicycles with me and all of that. So I guess what she's seeing in me is a younger, more vibrant, physically active grandmother. But also in this role, she has the safety net when something's going on with her parents and they're fighting, or she doesn't understand something. She is very able to come to me and talk about that relationship. Now, I had a very, very close relationship with my mom's parents, who were like second parents to me.
Yes.
And I could go to their house whenever I needed to or wanted to. But I don't really remember ever having the intimate conversations that Ida's having with me when she's sad and worried. And so I am very grateful that she and I have established this kind of relationship where she feels safe to
Yes.
come to me and talk to me. And that, and she comes on her own. I don't have to say, oh, Ida, you're looking a little down today, or is there something? And I'm very grateful for that relationship. And I think that comes from our playtime together, our hours of safety, our Friday night movie time with popcorn ritual. She comes over, she spends the night at least once, usually once a weekend, and we just share.
Yeah.
And she gets me and I get her, and I introduce her. Her mother and father are very good about introducing her to the creative arts too. I mean, she's taking guitar lessons now, but she paints with me. We make paper mache, we draw, and it is also a good outlet for her to get in touch with her creativity when she's young, so that will flow out of her when she is having emotional issues as she gets older, I think. So I don't know if that's answering all of your questions about that.
A lot of it, a lot of it. I mean, one of the things that you probably didn't experience with your grandmother is something that you're going through. And this is the sexuality side of menopause that I was touching on. And I mean, most like your friend, she perceived that she was invisible. I'm the kind of person who prefers to be invisible and not particularly wanting to. I mean, there's a certain societal disapproval as well of menopausal women being sexual or, taking charge of their sexuality. And we talked about it, as we were going through Life Book about the love relationship side of things. So Ida's also going to get to see that side of you,
Mhm.
the side of you that is willing to embrace her sexuality and step into, finding someone special. So, can you just talk a little bit about that as well?
Yes, I will. I was another friend, and my friends and I talk about these things very openly, and you and I are talking about it very openly. And one of my friends from childhood that I've known since she and I were in sixth grade together. So, 11 years, 12 years old. Anyway, she said to me she's also single and in a relationship. And when she's just started in this, she's been in I guess, this relationship now with a guy for about a year and a half or something. And I remember her saying, when she was thinking about becoming sexually intimate with him, and she said, let's face it, Deb, we look better in our clothes now at our age than without any clothes. So that there is a confidence that we have to have in ourselves, within ourselves,
Yes, yes.
I feel, to expose ourselves, to another human being, to become intimate. Before, you didn't think about it because we were, just physically attracted to one another, and you ended up, wanting to express that through intimacy and lovemaking and sex and all that kind of stuff. And there are challenges as we're older. When I was jokingly saying that, earlier, that I wanted that estrogen back, well, I want that estrogen back because it may also makes sexuality and having sex with your partner, just the fundamental physical
Yes.
exchange, easier,
Yeah.
because you're youthful. Estrogen gives your body, at least what I'm hearing from my friends, we all have to use estrogen supplements now to make, intercourse and lovemaking easier, and never did my mother talk to me about this. Never would my grandmother, I remember, I'm going to share this with you. I was looking back because I don't know if my mother, how comfortable my mom would be, but it's a laughing thing. When I was older and came back and was visiting my parents, I think it was before I was married, or maybe shortly after I was married. I used to, as a child, because I was stayed up late at night, I would, oh, here she comes. But anyway, I'm going to share it anyway. Uh, I never thought about my parents having sex ever, ever, ever. And I used to walk in late at night when they were sleeping and go around to my mom's side of the bed to get her hair dryer. And because she would fall asleep sometimes, with the hair dryer on and curlers and stuff in her hair. And so I had washed my hair and I was doing all of that. I opened my parents' door because they never locked it. They and I closed the door and I said, "Oh my God." and screamed it. And of course, I guess they were hysterical. And then I thought the next morning, I can't face my parents. I come downstairs, and the first thing that my dad says to me is, "Oh my God," so exact my words. And so he made it easy for me to face them, knowing that they are sexual beings.
Yeah.
And it was a joke, and it was a very intimate moment with my parents, realizing that as older people,
Yes.
we have the desire, we have the connect with the at least I still have the desire to have that connection with another human being and to enjoy that aspect. And I think that our society used to think that women just didn't want it after
Yes.
65,
Absolutely.
that was a phase in our life that was gone.
Yeah.
Now, I did hear Jane Fonda interviewed. She's like 85 or 80, something like that, maybe. And she did say in an interview that now that decision, she no longer wants intimacy like that, and that door is closed for her, and that the relationships and the inner exchanges that she wants with come from her friendships with her women, but that she no longer. I'm not at that stage yet.
No. I mean, I've written blogs about this recently, and certainly as a urogynecologist and as a sex therapist, I encourage women as much as possible. If it's possible, you need to stay sexually active as long as possible, because when you have sex, it exercises your pelvic floor, it keeps your vagina supple and elastic, and it prevents a lot of changes that take place because of the vagina shrinking and becoming atrophic because of lack of estrogen. And vaginal estrogen is available. Your doctor can prescribe it for you, so you don't have to give up on vaginal health just because
Uh-huh.
you become menopausal. And I would certainly encourage women to be sexually active as long as possible, and don't just put it aside because of menopause. Obviously, if you're with the wrong person, I'm not saying you should be sexually active with them even if they're the wrong person, because
Right.
at this time lots of women go through changes in their relationships. And um, but if you're in a relationship that is where it is possible to be sexually active, then I would encourage women to be sexually active as long as possible, just for this very important reason.
Well, that isn't shared so much. My
Oh, no, we
gynecologist
don't talk
did
about
say
it.
to me one time, use it or lose it.
Yes. Yeah, yes, absolutely. It's exactly that. It is exactly that. If
And
you
so
stop
I think
having sex, and if like you've stopped having sex for a while after the menopause, you will experience difficulties when you first start again. And it's much better that women are prepared for that. So doctors are not very good at explaining to women. Obviously, women don't go and get help. They feel embarrassed to talk about, oh, I'm in a sexual relationship now after so many years, and society will think I shouldn't be sexual, or I shouldn't be in a sexual relationship at my age. And it's irrespective of how old your partner is. you know um, there's this whole thing. They talk about toy boys and sugar daddies. They talk about sugar, but the toy boy is always looked at with much more disdain than a
yes.
sugar daddy is.
And why is that?
I don't know. It's something about culture and women, and the disapproval of sexuality in older women. Yeah, that there is a stamp of disapproval there. But I would suggest, any older women who are in on this discussion with us, go talk to your doctor and get your prescription of vaginal estrogens. And when you do have sex for the first time, use plenty of lubricant. A lot of women feel very embarrassed about needing lubricant because they think, oh well, if I'm in a sexual relationship, I have to get aroused. That's the only way I can prove that I'm attracted to the other person. And that's
Right.
absolutely not true. As you go through menopause, your biology is working. It's not in your favor, unfortunately, especially if you haven't been sexually active for a long time. So it's so much more helpful to admit it and just use the lubricant. It's not
Uh-huh.
it's not a it's not a negative mark to use lubricant.
Uh-huh.
And particularly water-based lubricants are much better than silicon-based lubricants, because your vagina changes in structure, and it's much more it's kinder to the vagina to use a water-based lubricant.
Oh,
And also, I would encourage women to use sex toys, as they go. And suppose you're between relationships, or you're not actually in a sexual relationship, you keep your vagina healthy by using a sex toy, and make sure you use water-based lubricant with sex toys, because a lot of sex toys are made of silicon. So you don't want to use silicon-based lubricants with them; they can damage sex toys. So I would
oh.
definitely encourage all of this stuff, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation so openly.
Yes. See, you are a wealth. You need to be out here telling us these things, because these are questions that we are shy about asking,
Yes.
and that we only learn through discussions with our women friends, but they don't have the knowledge base that you're sharing with us. I love this. I'm going to tell all of my friends to listen up and to get on your blog.
That's,
Because you don't get this frank conversation
no, we don't.
between your doctor and but between us as friends,
Yes.
and wanting to share this information with the world at large. I think you have such, I've said it over and over, I think you have such a valuable role in our society to keep we aging women vital, and knowing what is happening within our bodies, and what's normal and what's not normal, and how we can change. Like, I didn't know that about the water-based and silicone, and the you know keeping
Sex toys.
myself. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love it.
get a good size sex toy. That's absolutely encouraged. No, not just that, something that stimulates the clitoris, something that exercises the vagina. That's the one I
Oh,
recommend.
see, that's so great to know. Who would have thought that, Nilima?
Because we we don't talk about all this stuff as menopausal women, and because we've got this menopause platform, this is really helpful to
Oh,
open up
it's great.
and chat about. So um, what's new about 2021 for you, Deborah? What
Well,
special?
managing this COVID, which is in our lives now, and getting back. I've missed my granddaughter tremendously. So getting back and reconnecting with her, and she's in my little pod. She and my son, and his partner, and starting. I'm experimenting with some new art, new materials,
Yes.
and I'm gearing up to being inspired by COVID, and trying to use so I'll probably, I think this year I would like to come up with something. A couple of years ago, I made a watercolor calendar for friends of mine and distributed it as gifts and stuff. So a lot of them have missed it this year, but I was more inspired with COVID to
Heal.
working on my inner health,
Yes.
and physical and all of that. And so I didn't think about sharing and expressing myself. But I think I'm back to doing that. I'm looking for a life partner.
Yeah, yeah, that's
I'm back
amazing.
on
Back on
back
the
on the
dating scene. Yes.
dating scene. So I'm ever hopeful that once COVID is over, that I'll be able to meet people. Oh, sorry. That I'll be able to meet uh, the love of my life for my second part, for the second part. I'm sorry, my son is, I'm trying to, speaking of my son, I think it's probably my granddaughter
Okay.
is probably trying to, I'm trying to turn off the silent mode. Technology and me are not the greatest, but that's my, and my one of my sons is also getting married in June back in the United States, and has asked me to officiate. So I'm very excited about that, and all of my family coming together. I haven't all 4 boys. We haven't been in the same place and at the same time for like 7 years. So
Wow,
I'm
that's a
really
long
looking
time.
forward to all of us gathering together with our family and sharing this, great, adventure that Benjamin and Delia are beginning. So, and seeing my friends in person,
So I just want to wish you all the very best for 2021. And I'm going to tell our viewers they can find you on your website, deborahroderick.com.
Yes.
And they can see your paintings. And if they want your calendar, another calendar, they should put in a request.
Should, and they, if they're
Via the
interested in
website.
anything, sure, they can contact me.
So thank you so much for this
Oh, thank
lovely
you. This was a
conversation.
great morning, a great discussion.
Yeah,
I
and
think,
look forward to chatting again another time.
yes. Take care. Happy
Take care.
day.
Happy day. Bye bye.
Bye.